You talked about how your freshman year was when Stanford won the NCAA, I guess most recently until this past year. So, just share a little bit of your thoughts about the experience for the players, what it was like. It sounds like, did you get to go, actually?
I didn't. I actually didn't make the trip. Believe it or not, I was watching it in the Sigma Chi fraternity house, glued to the TV for 4 days. I remember vividly having a huge qualifier for the fifth spot. Brad Lanning eventually winning the fifth spot and going to play well at NC2A. He's a great guy and was a fifth-year senior at the time and really deserved to be there. So I came close to playing, but didn't get a chance. And I think a couple of the things that I remember about that week were I really remember how prepared we were. I think that Coach Goodwin he knew how good of a team we had just based on our year's results. If you look at our results that year, I think up until last year, there was not a team that even came close to having the results that team did in '93-'94 as far as the tournaments throughout the year. Coach Goodwin also had a real good understanding of what the course was like we were going to play at NC2A, so we worked a lot on, in the spring, we'd get up early and have short game practices, like at 7 in the morning. We did a lot of work like down in the first fairway of hitting the ball just in a real tight landing area. Which Stonebridge down in McKinney, Texas provided at NC2As. And the other thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that Coach Goodwin he sent us all over the Bay Area trying to find wind. That was kind of the story of the year. Justin Leonard was a senior that year. Texas rather was one of the top ranked teams. And the story kind of going into it was, well, how would Stanford play being a top, I think we were number 1 or number 2 that year. Going into the event, how would they play in a situation where it was hard and fast and windy? All conditions that we don't find a lot in the Bay Area. So Wally sent us around to, we played Palo Alto Muni, and we'd go over to the East Bay, and we'd just find places, Half Moon Bay, we'd find places where there were wind. Ironically enough, we got down there and the guys teed it up, and for 4 days they played not a breath of wind. I guess life works in mysterious ways, but looking back on that championship and knowing the guys really well and seeing what transpired, I think, the two notable rounds were, Nota Begay 62 in the second round, while switch putting, I think that was a new methodology that he was just starting to do, and putting from both the left and the right side of the ball. And then Willie Yanagazawa, who was a pretty unknown walk-on, or transfer rather, that Coach Goodwin brought in from UC Irvine. He came in and just played his tail off that whole year, ended up shooting 64 the final round at NC2As, chipped in a couple times, and was his career low. And I guess, what a time to do it. You've got the final round of the NC2As on the line, you go shoot 64. So he kind of carried us the final round. But you look at, I always say the best teams are the deepest teams. And you look at the scores that those guys shot. Brad Lanning contributing a couple even par rounds, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood. As the fifth man, when Casey Martin, who was a consensus All-American, struggled early on, and then Casey coming back and contributing. So it was a team effort, and I think that the teams that I've seen over the years win are teams that are able to do that. And so it was a really special year, no question, and look back on it with a lot of fondness. And you definitely, the thing that I talked to my team last year when we won the championship a lot about was how being around those guys as a guy not playing a lot, the one thing I took from it was that they had a true belief in what they were doing. They knew that they could go to a really difficult school, they could be swamped with all the academic pressures that Stanford provides, but that wasn't going to stop them in their path to winning an NC2A championship. And I think for our guys to hear that in today's age and nowadays is important, because I think that it's really easy to kind of discount this idea of hey, you can do both. You can play really high level golf, and you can go to a great school. And so that team in particular, I think, is a big kind of icon that I go to a lot with recruiting, and when I think about how to prepare the team, because those guys were on a mission, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. So it was pretty neat to see them put it together.
That's great.
Yeah.
And what about the next couple of years? You said Tiger was a freshman and you were a sophomore. You got to play with him then a couple of years.
Yeah.
Any kind of great stories or
well,
anecdotes
I think
about
it was neat. It was funny because I always laugh. There's so many Tiger stories, so many that you remember and funny things to talk about. I think that the real neat thing to see was this dynamic championship team. Really, not everyone considered them not to be as good as they could be, because next year Tiger was coming. So that they kind of hit the jackpot a year before the real plan was supposed to take effect. And I got to give Coach Goodwin a lot of credit too. Here he is redshirting his two best players in their junior year, kind of waiting around for Tiger. They came back a year thinking, oh, this is our year in prep and we're going to get ready, and then they go and win. Now you've got the #1 recruit in the country, and the records and the results show themselves. I mean, for 2 years there, we were the dominant team in college golf. I mean, there's probably only equal by Oklahoma State in terms of wins, if they did. I don't know if they did or not, but I mean, we won consistently, and so it was neat to see that whole dynamic of these guys that were all Americans, and then all of a sudden you've got this kid named Tiger showing up on campus, and how that would all go down. A funny story about Tiger's first event, though, one of the rites of passage for our team, and to this day it still exists, is that the freshmen are in charge of loading the van and carrying all the luggage. In lieu of some harsher treatment, and there's no hazing allowed anymore, unfortunately. Fortunately and unfortunately for story's sake, but not much that goes on. But we still have held on to this tradition that freshmen carry the luggage. And so Tiger gets in the van for his first trip, and they get up to San Francisco, and Noda's sitting in the shotgun seat as the fifth-year senior, and Casey's up front, and Tiger's in the back of the van, and they get out and they start to walk to the ticket counter. And Tiger jumped out and he's like, hey, what's up, guys? Are you going to get your luggage? And they said, no, you're going to get our luggage. And so he said, wait a minute, I didn't know about this. They said, well, you need to learn pretty quickly. So lo and behold, Tiger spends about, he takes his time. It takes him about 10 or 15 minutes to get all the luggage up to the check-in counter at the airport. And Tiger said, this will be the last time I do this. I mean, he was ticked off. He's like, I'm a freshman. I don't need this. This is abuse, And so they didn't hear what he wanted to say, but lo and behold, he goes out we played at New Mexico, UNM, and he goes out and wins the tournament, first tournament his freshman year. And so, needless to say, the tradition lasted 1 week. So he didn't touch another piece of luggage, I don't think, the rest of the time. The problem was that year is that I was starting to play more, and that the next guy in the pecking order was yours truly, so I got stuck carrying a lot of the bags. But we laughed about that, and you look back on that year where we were runner-up to Oklahoma State in the playoff, first time ever in the history of the NC2A that had happened, and all the different stories that had gone on there. That Oklahoma State playing 4 against R5 in the playoff at the NC2As, which was even another layer of craziness to the whole thing. They had their 5th player, Leif Westerberg, who was a Swedish player, was on his way back for the European Amateur, I believe, or the British Amateur, and so they made a decision. Coach Holder, who's kind of an icon at Oklahoma State, has been in the game for a number of years, made a decision they thought it was probably too close, and so Leif Westerberg, the 5th man for Oklahoma State, decided to get on a flight back for the tournament. And they decided to play 5 against 4. So Alan Bratton on Oklahoma State, who's now the Oklahoma State assistant coach, he birdies his last 2 in regulation. Noda misses like a 5-footer on the last hole to win it outright for 2 in a row, and they go into this playoff 5 against 4. And Bratton birdies 2 in the playoff, and so here they are. They beat us at the Scarlet Course, and they kind of stole one from us. And everyone all the Stanford guys I know to this day kind of scratch their head and they say, how did that one get away? But to their credit, Oklahoma State had a phenomenal team, and some of the guys that were on that team are still playing today. You think about Chris Cox and Chris Tidlin and some of the guys that were fantastic players and some of Oklahoma State's best. But I think that it was. It's neat because you talk to Tiger and you ask him about what he regrets about Stanford. One of the only things he says is that he doesn't have a team championship at Stanford, and that's one thing that he never. You think about all that he's accomplished in the game. That's one thing that he was never able to be a part of, and probably would give up a lot to do that. So, but just a fantastic.